2021, across the vast highways and scenic landscapes of the United States, a young couple began documenting what appeared to be a dream, a journey that thousands would later watch, analyze, and question. Because for Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, this road trip was more than travel. It was a lifestyle, a curated vision of freedom, love, and adventure, shared through carefully selected photos, smiling videos, and peaceful moments that suggested a life untouched by conflict. And as their van moved from state to state, their digital presence grew, capturing sunsets, laughter, and the illusion of perfection. An illusion that would later become one of the most haunting elements of this case, because what the audience saw was not the full story. And as investigators would later discover, what existed behind the camera told a different narrative, one filled with tension, emotional strain, and subtle warning signs that were invisible to the millions watching online, because perfection, when documented, often hides the cracks beneath it. And as the timeline begins, everything aligns with expectation. Their journey follows a pattern of movement, social media activity, and interactions that reinforce the image they wanted the world to see. Yet, within that pattern, small inconsistencies begin to emerge. Moments where posts are delayed and expressions seem forced. And it is in these moments that the foundation of the case is built, on a sequence of subtle deviations from normalcy. Because timelines do not break without warning, they shift, gradually, quietly, until the change becomes undeniable. As we follow their journey, we must remember that what appears perfect is constructed, and behind every image lies a reality never fully visible. In this case, that hidden reality would soon come to the surface in the most devastating way possible, transforming love into mystery and loss. What begins as a dream ends as a timeline that the world would try to reconstruct, piece by piece, searching for where everything changed. As the journey continued, the digital timeline began to reveal inconsistencies, subtle at first, but significant when viewed in retrospect. While social media continued to portray adventure, the frequency and tone of posts began to change, and messages became less consistent. Interactions appeared strained, and the seamless narrative they had constructed started to fragment, revealing key moments where behavior deviated. In modern cases, digital footprints act as silent witnesses, recording not only movement, but intent, emotion, and change. A pattern emerged, one that suggested increasing tension, emotional instability, and possible conflict, providing context for the final events. As the days progressed, the gaps between posts widened, and the narrative that once felt controlled began to unravel. When a story changes without explanation, it creates questions that would become central to the investigation. The most critical moment is not always the most visible, but the point where continuity is lost and the known gives way to the unknown. For Gabby, that moment would come suddenly, transforming a documented journey into a mystery defined by absence. As the timeline approaches its final entries, the data becomes sparse, and the story shared so openly begins to disappear, leaving behind fragments that hint at what happened, but never fully reveal it, fueling speculation and public consciousness. People are drawn to the silence that follows the last recorded moment, understanding that this is a story of transition from visibility to invisibility, from a life documented to a life that suddenly stops being recorded. It is within that transition that the mystery begins. When Gabby Petito was officially reported missing, the case quickly escalated, drawing national attention as authorities and the public began searching for answers. Because what made this case unique was not just the disappearance itself, but the extensive digital trail that preceded it. A trail that allowed investigators to reconstruct her final known movements with remarkable precision, yet still left critical questions unanswered. And as search efforts intensified, the focus shifted to the locations she had last been seen, areas that were both vast and remote, creating challenges that required coordination, technology, and public assistance. And it was during this phase that the case transformed into a national phenomenon, with millions following updates, analyzing clues, and contributing to the search in unprecedented ways, because the story had already been told in fragments online. And now those fragments were being re-examined, reinterpreted, and connected in an attempt to find the truth. And as days passed, the tension grew. Because in cases like this, time is critical, and every moment without answers increases uncertainty, until finally, the discovery was made. Gabby's body was found in Wyoming, confirming the worst fears and shifting the case from a missing persons investigation to a homicide. A transition that brought both clarity and deeper mystery. Because, while the outcome was now known, the circumstances surrounding it remained unclear, and attention turned immediately to Brian Laundrie, who had returned home alone, refused to cooperate, and then disappeared himself. Creating a second timeline, one that would unfold in parallel with the first, adding complexity and urgency to an already intense investigation, because now there were two narratives, one ending in discovery and the other continuing into uncertainty. And as authorities searched for Brian, the public followed every development, analyzing behavior, tracking movements, and speculating on what might have happened, because the absence of answers creates space where theories emerge, where possibilities expand, and where the story evolves beyond its original form, becoming not just a case, but a cultural moment, a shared experience of investigation, emotion, and curiosity. And as the search continued, the case reached a point where resolution seemed both imminent and distant. Because while the evidence pointed towards certain conclusions, the lack of direct answers left room for doubt, for interpretation, and for ongoing debate. And it is within this tension that the story reaches its peak, because the discovery of Gabby provided closure in one sense, but opened a new chapter of questions that would define the case moving forward. Weeks after the discovery of Gabby Petito, the search for Brian Laundrie came to an end in a way that would leave the case forever, unresolved in the minds of many, because he was found dead in a nature reserve, bringing a conclusion to his timeline, but not to the questions surrounding it. Because with his death, the possibility of a full account, a direct explanation, or a clear narrative was lost, leaving behind only evidence, interpretation, and speculation. And this is where the case transforms from an investigation into a lasting mystery. Because while certain facts are established, the absence of a complete story creates a gap that cannot be filled. A space where the known and the unknown coexist, shaping the way the case is remembered, discussed, and understood. And as we reflect on this story, we must consider not only the events themselves, but the broader implications. The way social media influence perception, the role of digital timelines in modern investigations, and the psychological dynamics that can exist beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. Because this case is not just about what happened, but about how it was seen, how it was shared, and how it was interpreted by millions, creating a narrative that is both deeply information and widely public. And as the final moments of the timeline fade into silence, we are left with a story that is defined not just by its conclusion, but by its gaps, by the unanswered questions, and by the enduring impact it has had on those who followed it. Because in the end, the most haunting aspect of this case is not just the loss, but the realization that even in a world where so much is documented, so much remains unknown. And it is within that unknown that the story continues to live, to evolve, and to captivate, reminding us that behind every image, every post, and every moment shared, there may exist a reality that is far more complex than it appears in We That. Remember, subscribe Criminalverse, where every crime hides a story.